Yes. Yes. Sorry. Okay, that probably is enough of the in music.
I have it muted over here, so I can't actually hear it. I assume it's awesome, but
You were way too loud. I fixed it.
I was way too loud.
I fixed it.
When you hear me, you clack clack. Hear me clack clacking on my keyboard.
No, you're peaking a little bit there in your vocals.
Okay.
I have
Well, I can
fixed it.
also adjust where my microphone is. So.
Yeah, but that would just make it quieter for me. It would. Well, don't worry about it.
The chat's hearing me through you, so if I'm quieter for you, I'll be quieter for them.
You were louder for them than you were for me.
Okay.
Don't question it. this audio is like magic.
Yes, except baffling. Yeah, magic is easy to understand. Audio is crazy.
Audio is bizarre.
It really is.
I would like to understand audio, but at the same time, I do not understand audio.
All right. So,
This is not coffee.
Yep.
Sorry.
Welcome to the Geekery stream for this week. We are doing Being a Player 102.
Last week we talked about the beginnings of being a player. We talked about starting to, once you have your campaign, where do you go from there? Like, how do you start being a decent player? How do you start building a character? And today,
talked about some of the basic mechanics and stuff like that. So,
yes.
Yeah. So today we're going to talk about some of the slightly more advanced things you want to be thinking about while you're coming up with your character, and how they integrate with the group, and also how they integrate with the world that the game is taking place in. And so
this is not coffee. This is tea. It's not even caffeinated tea. It's peppermint.
What are we going on about coffee?
Pauline was saying coffee at 8 p.m. I too like to live dangerously. This is not coffee. Trust me, if I had coffee right now, I would not sleep until 6 o'clock in the morning.
Man, you can barely handle coffee first thing in the morning.
I can't. I really can't.
Seducing the dragon comes later, Ace.
And only if you're
So
a bard. So you have to play a
no,
bard
I mean
first.
any party can theoretically do it. It's just bards have bonuses.
bonus
Anyway, no.
bonus towards seducing dragons. Oh
Yes,
my.
a
Does
great big
that come
bonus.
in fizz bands?
You have to roll to see how big your bonus is.
That comes in fizz bands, right? That's the untalked about bard subclass.
Yeah, well, actually, it's a feat.
Oh, it's a
But
feat.
anyway,
Okay. And do they
yes.
get it for free?
Well, I mean, you've heard about feet fetishes, right? So.
Ah.
Okay, so let's actually talk some gaming here. For all the wonderful people who have come here to hear us talk about gaming. So,
I think they'd rather want to talk about bards and dragons.
it's possible. It's possible. All right. So when you're coming up with your character idea, one of the things you're going to want to do is know what your character's role is in the party. We've talked before about D&D as a team sport. Your hero is important, but you're not the hero of the story. You are a hero in the story, right? So if you've played any online like MMOs or things like Overwatch or anything, Team Fortress, you will understand some of this stuff. And all of these games really they go back to D&D eventually. The D&D is like their common ancestor. And so there's some pretty standard roles in a party, and in MMOs you have the tank, DPS, healer, controller, right? Those are very combat oriented. D&D has got a lot more going on than just fighting, at least if it's a good game. So party roles can include things like the face, who's like the person who's has the best social skills, negotiates with the king or tries to talk down the villain or things like that. And character is sometimes called a skill monkey, who's the person who like knows how to find and disarm traps or knows all kinds of esoteric lore or things like that. And then in combat, there is still sort of this tank damage control what do you call it, diamond, right? It's not as hard coded as it is in MMOs. 4E kind of tried to make it hard coded, and the community hated it, and it really didn't work very well anyway.
Well, 4E was D&D trying to be an MMO in the first place.
Yeah. Well, it was trying to be an MMO and a collectible card game all at once, but we won't get into that.
A nice thing about 5E is that different classes can take up different roles as well. Like you can have a paladin that can be a tanking role, or they can go more in DPS, heavy hitting damage role.
And paladins are very good face characters.
Also very good face characters. They can be, depending on their subclass, depending on their build, like depending on, like last time we talked about ability scores, depending on their ability scores, what you put on your skills.
Mm-hmm.
You could be practically anything. You could be a fighter who is the most intellectual fighter ever.
Yeah.
You could be the smart fighter.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we mentioned, I believe we mentioned last time talking about the session 0, which is before the game starts, everybody's sort of talking about how the game's going to go, what character they might like to play, etc. And during the session 0 is when you sort of hash out the basics of what your role is going to be. And what role you want to have in the party will influence your choice of your character's class. Now, your character's class is like their profession. So, the big ones, the ones that have always been around in some form or another, are fighter, magic user, and some kind of healing class, which is usually cleric. And then rogue came early on, and the rogue was sort of the skill monkey, the original D&D. And there's lots of other classes now. There's like 13 classes these days, something like that.
The barbarian, bard, cleric, druid,
Yep.
fighter, monk, rogue. No, monk,
warlock,
paladin, rogue,
monk, paladin, rogue,
sorcerer,
sorcerer,
wizard,
warlock, wizard,
wizard,
yeah,
artificer.
artificer. Yeah,
I lost count.
yeah.
I
So the
was
point
supposed to
is,
be counting and I lost count.
there's a lot of classes, and
Do not
each class,
don't let an ADHD person count and talk at
yeah,
the same time.
yeah, and each class has lots of what we call subclasses. In 5e, the terminology is something else, but in the broader gaming community, there's just subclasses, and a subclass is, you're a fighter who has a specialization in being knowing lots of different maneuvers. You're a battle master, and that's a battle master fighter. Battle master is a subclass of fighter.
Yeah, for each class, it's going to be called something else. Like for wizards, it's called a school. For warlocks, it's called their
pact.
Pact, but they're basically subclasses. Is what the general community has started calling them, and we're not counting Blood Hunter. It's third party.
Yeah, and there are tons of third-party classes and subclasses. Right now, we're talking about the official stuff. And so what role you want to have in the party, like I said, will determine, or at least point you towards a class. So if you know you want to be a tank, right? You know what do tanks do? Well, they hit hard. They take lots of damage.
They control the battlefield.
Yeah, they protect their friends, right? By soaking up damage. Now, this dates all the way back to the earliest days in D&D when fighters were referred to as meat shields, and their job was to stand between the bad guys and the wizard.
That's still their job.
That's where the tank. Yeah,
that's still their job.
Yeah, and that's how the tank role was initiated. So who's good at doing those things? You look at it. Barbarians have an enormous hit die.
Yes.
Barbarians resist lots of types of damage.
Yes.
Right. And barbarians, when they rage, can do lots of damage.
Yes.
So barbarian is like the best, almost best tank.
Almost.
In 5e.
They are pretty good.
They're really high on the.
They're really high. They do run into the problem where they will run out of rage. Mm-hmm. They can be easily manipulated. Like they have, pretty sure they have really low, like, intelligence, wisdom scores.
Yeah, I mean every class has their strengths and weaknesses. Fighters are obvious tanks. They wear heavy armor. They can carry a shield, or they can use a polearm, and with certain feats can control a wide section of the battlefield so that people can't get past them. And so barbarians and fighters, very good tanks.
Yes.
Paladins are amazing tanks. They also can wear heavy armor and a shield and have fighter style hit points. They have spells that let them. There's one called Compelled Duel, where you cast a Compelled Duel spell on a foe, and that foe has big penalties to attack anybody but you. Right. That's the closest thing 5e has to like an MMO taunt. Right, is the Compelled Duel spell. So you think, okay, I want to play the tank. Well, you're probably looking at a barbarian, a fighter, or a paladin.
You could also do druid. Druid can also be a tank if druid of the Circle of the Moon, and you do like a bear, or you do an alligator, or something big and a lot of HP like that. They'll be an HP tank, but they won't have really high AC. And especially even as they level up, they're still going to have very high AC because the druids, even if they have armor, the druid's armor is absorbed into their body when they shapeshift, so they just take the AC of whatever they shapeshift. So it would be
but I mean, druids, the way druids tank is by turning into other animals, using that animal shape's hit points until they run out, and then they change back into themselves.
And then they do it again.
They do it again, yeah. So
let's see, what else could tank? Could a warlock tank?
I don't know enough about the ins and outs to know how good a warlock could tank. I know that there are warlock tanks builds, and that's the thing is most classes can do jobs,
right,
to a various, or take on roles to a certain extent. Like wizards probably not going to tank unless you have spells. Now there are spells that can make wizards effectively tanks.
Pretty tanky. get a
you
high
can, yeah.
dexterity wizard, put on what was it called? Magic armor, mage armor.
Mage armor and blink and
Yeah, which
a couple
which
other spells.
which is what makes Eldritch Knights an extremely good tank, which is the
Yeah.
subclass for fighter, which it's basically the tank, kind of the tank build for fighter. Is you go Eldritch Knight, you have heavy plate armor, but you also have wizard spells like shield, which adds +5 AC to your AC for your entire round.
Yeah. Now, see, the thing with this is that wizards are not natural tanks,
No,
right? Wizards are more geared towards control or possibly DPS, but mostly control, right?
there are
And
some
you can make them tanky, but
sort of.
that's not like they're where they default to. And so when you know as you get more experience in playing the game, you can start finding these ways to do weird things with classes.
There are some limitations in being able to use the different uh, different roles in different classes. Like you said, wizard probably not going to be a tank because they do suffer from serious issues with it. Like
Yeah.
they're low HP and
Yeah,
they're reliant
have
on
low hit points.
spells.
They don't wear armor. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, and so just the point of that is that during your session 0, if you know you want to be the tank, and you don't have some kind of a weird build in mind, like you don't want to be the tanky wizard, you just want to be a tank, then you're probably going to look at barbarian, fighter, or paladin and choose one that fits like a character that you'd think would be interesting. And again, like if you want more of a social role, like if you want to be the party face, then you're going to look at classes that have abilities that complement that. So Bard is like the classic party face. Bard and Warlock both are classes designed around role playing first.
Yes.
And they're like combat utility second.
Usually, what you'll want to do first is look towards classes that lean towards like the sort of ability stat that you would go for. Like for you want to be the party face, you want to look towards charisma, which really which paladin, bard, warlock all focus on. Sorcerer also focuses on that as well, and sorcerer gets plenty of party face type spells.
Yeah, not so much skills.
Not so much skills, but definitely they do get party face spells, and that goes back towards tanking too. Like if you want to focus on tanking, you probably want to look towards classes that have some either lean towards Constitution or Strength.
Is the big one. Strength is a good one too. So yeah,
or Dex. You can be a Dex tank, and then focus towards classes that use that a lot, which is, barbarian, fighter, paladin, usually lean towards either higher HP or they focus towards Constitution.
Yeah, and you don't have to like have all this stuff memorized to play the game.
No. You do not. And use your book, please. Like, your book is here. Your player's handbook is there. You should use it. And there are other roles such as like the controller. Now, a lot of different classes can be the controller. Usually, they're going to have spells that can control, like a wizard or a bard are both great controllers, and they have spells that will control the battlefield.
Rangers can be pretty good controllers. They have Entangle. At least I think they do in 5e. They certainly used to. They have like pets who can tie up a character and things like that. So
the controller, I should clarify, the controller is anything that controls the battlefield. So a controller will be like a tactician who is using tactical spells to position either themselves, their party members, or enemies in specific places to control where everything is. Like using web spells or using grease. It controls the movement of the enemies.
And plotline, what you're saying here about your race influencing how you tank, we're going to get into that. So we're getting there. So Yeah, and um, my train of thought's been derailed. So just what your role in your party is, you know, think about what you want to have. And uh, one of the things about D&D is that there's a wide variety of things. Most characters can usually do like one role very strongly and another role uh, competently, right? So you have a lot of overlap,
Yeah.
and there are lots of different roles you could play. So um, you don't have to be locked into tank, DPS, face, blah blah blah, skill monkey, etc. Um, but these are things that come up a lot. So they tend to be sort of the angles that parties like to have
It's
covered.
good to sort of have a focus and having a role, and thinking about your role, even if you have several roles, is a good way to focus in your character and focus in what they will be doing, either during battle or in during social encounters.
Hmm.
So, like, if you're the party face, you will be thinking about your social encounters. You will be thinking about, okay, how can we convince this person? How can we deceive this person? Uh, if you're the controller, you'll be focusing, how do I control the battlefield? It helps you to narrow down what you'll be doing at
Hmm.
any given moment.
Yeah, and 5e especially, they talk about the three pillars of play, and so those are uh, the three main activities that take place in D&D. One is combat, you fight monsters. One is social, which is talking to NPCs, talking to other players, shopping, just anything where you're interacting with other
Shopping
characters,
comes up
learning.
so much.
Yeah, well, I mean, that depends on the party, but yeah, for our party, we have a couple
Yeah.
members of our group who just really like to shop, and we have sometimes sessions where
What is
people are just
shopping?
shopping and shopping and
What is
shopping. But
shopping?
and the third pillar is exploration. Now, exploration is kind of anything where you're interacting with the world, but not a person. So it can be overland travel. It can be exploring a dungeon. It can be looking for traps. It can be, looking at your map and seeing, are we in the right place? It can be navigation. Um, and most classes have like a strong element, one of them, and are decent at one of them and are not very good at the other. So, like, typically, a barbarian will be strong in combat, and decent probably in exploration and weak in social.
Not very good in social. I don't think I've
Yeah.
seen a social barbarian yet.
No, they're rare. But then you look at Bard, right? Bard is probably very strong in social and like decent in combat and not very good at exploration.
Well,
It
the
depends. It depends on.
bard is considered the jack of all trades. If you build your bard correctly, if you build the
Yeah,
bard in a
you
specific
can
way, you
choose the
can do
second
that.
focus.
Yeah, it's more like, I feel like, yeah, a class is going to have a main focus, but then the other two focuses, you decide what you want to lean into through your skills. Like, if you want to have a skill to be more exploration focused, you put your skills into survival, or you put your skills into uh, perception, and
Yeah.
those aid more in the exploration. But
Yeah.
if you want to lean more into like uh, combat, or you want to lean more into social, you put your skills into intimidation. You put your skills into uh, athletics,
Yeah.
acrobatics, and
Yeah.
it's all about how you. I think in this case it's definitely leans more towards player choice as opposed to just something
Mhm.
that's pre-built into the
Yeah.
class.
Yes. And Ace, you're absolutely right. Spider-Man is a controller first.
Oh yeah,
Uh, he's
definitely.
he's that's his main way he does everything. Uh, anyway, so the second part of building your character around a role is once you've sort of chosen what your character's like, you can choose. I mean, sometimes it depends on if you have a character idea and you want to make them fit into a role. or if you have a role you want to play, you can build a character that suits that. So, um, Plotline mentioned choosing a race that complements your desired abilities. So, if you want to play a fighter, for example, if you want to play a very tanky, very durable fighter, you might play a dwarf because they get a bonus to their constitution. They're resistant to a lot of like poison and disease and things like this, right? So they're very tough. They're very sturdy. Dwarven fighters make very good fighters. Uh, and Goliaths, they get a bonus to their strength, and I forget all of the various things they get, but they make good barbarians. They make good fighters. They're very good tanks. Um, Characters, uh, like my personal fave, I'm Team Tabaxi Rogue, right? So what Tabaxi, they get a bonus to their dexterity. They get a smaller bonus to their charisma, right? So right there, you're already looking at Rogue and Bard as good choices, right?
Rogue, Bard, Warlock,
Warlock, yeah.
Ranger.
They could even be sorcerers.
Yeah.
But Tabaxi also have a special ability. Well, they have two special abilities around movement, right? So they have a climbing speed because of their claws, right? They can climb up walls. And they have what's called Tabaxi speed, which is they can double their speed for a turn, their running speed, provided that at some point they spend a turn not moving, right? So that Tabaxi get the zoomies, they and then hold still, right?
Does that apply?
So,
So, mechanics question, just off the top of
yeah,
my head. Does that apply to if they're taking a dash action too? So movement and dash
yeah,
action, do they
yeah.
both
It
double
doubles
that?
all of their movement. If they're on a broom of flying, it doubles the broom of flying. So it just the rules just say it doubles their movement.
I would say no to that. on feet, yes. On broom, no.
Well, I mean that's a GM call. I mean, but going rules as written, it does apply. It applies to their climbing speed. It applies to anything rules as written.
Good to know. Now you don't have to play to your class though. Like it's really like it's useful. Like it's very useful to pick a race that is beneficial to your class. Having something that has you have ranged weapons. You probably have a dex score. You have you want to be strong. You probably want to have something that has a bonus to strength. I am playing an artificer that has a Tabaxi artificer, so they have neither. They don't have intelligence, which is what is.
Yeah, artificers are based on intelligence, so like elves make very good artificers.
There's dex, so it's benefiting her AC, but it doesn't really benefit the class. You don't have to. Like if you have an idea for a class race combination, do it. Run with it. See how it works. It may work for you.
5e is very forgiving about it's real hard to make a bad character.
It is. Even when you're choosing race, it's hard to make a bad character depending on which race and which class you're choosing.
Yeah. There are combinations that will give you a boost, but there are none that are dead in the water.
Yeah, that's true, Ace. So Ace says this is why humans are good D&D races. They're good at everything.
Well, specifically, they get to choose what they're good at.
Yeah,
because they get stat bumps they can put wherever they want, or they get smaller stat bumps they can put wherever they want. And they get a feat at the beginning of their choice, and feats in 5e are much more powerful than they were in previous editions. So getting a feat early on is a very big boost.
So yeah,
yes, humans are very versatile.
They are. Like you can make them into anything. That is their point. You can make them into any class. You can make them into any role. You're going to be a human, a normal human. So trade off.
Yeah, humans in D&D are kind of like Sokka in Avatar. He couldn't do bending, but he was good at so many other things, right?
And especially puns.
Yeah,
that's what his specialty was in. His specialty was in puns.
Yeah. So
He's a bard.
yeah.
Don't judge me. He is a bard, or at least multi-class bard.
But let me loop back a little bit, because the reason I brought up the Tabaxi movement, right, is that's an ability that ties into some classes better than others. Like wizards don't need to be able to move usually. Wizards stand in the back and fling spells typically.
If a wizard is
Yeah.
moving, something has gone wrong.
Yeah, usually a wizard only moves because everybody ran away and the wizard has to get somewhere where they can cast spells again. Or somebody's chasing him and the wizard has to get the heck out of there. And then they're going to use one of their oh shit spells to teleport away. Um, so Tabaxi speed doesn't help wizards. On the other hand, characters like rogues and monks, that
Tosh.
depend on mobility, mobility being very important to them, really benefit from the Tabaxi ability.
Monk rogues are disgusting.
Monk rogues.
I mean,
yeah.
I'm sorry. Monk tabaxis are disgusting.
Yeah. So just to pick on the Tabaxi rogue, rogues have a special ability that gives them what boils down to an extra turn that they can only use to hide or run away from the enemy or like move, right? And it's called cunning action. Now, if you're already getting extra movement, right? Because you have cunning action, you get to move. If you do nothing but move, on a regular turn you can move twice. On a rogue turn you can move 3 times, right? Now, if you double that, a Tabaxi on a regular turn can effectively move 4 times. Using cunning action can effectively move 6 times.
And if you want to make it dumber, give her haste.
Yeah. So you put the rogue's cunning action with the Tabaxi speed. You've got a character who's stupid fast, right? And there are times when being stupid fast is awesome, and there are classes that work better because they can be stupid fast. So when you're looking at races, sometimes you want to look at what that race's special abilities are and what can benefit from those abilities. Bugbears have super long arms compared to other creatures, right? So they effectively have an ability called reach that lets them extend their reach further out. Again, not great for wizards, but really good for tanks because they can reach more people to hit them. They can reach more people to stop them from moving, etc. So again, look at what your special abilities of a race are and think about how that could help a particular role.
Now, you can still get those sort of abilities in different ways. Like, you do not have to rely on your race to... Say, you don't have to be a bugbear to rely on getting reach. If you want, let's say you're a fighter or a paladin, you want reach, you can specialize in a different weapon. You can get a halberd, which...
You can get a halberd,
Swiftstorm uses a halberd, so her reach is insane because she is a large creature and has a halberd. And it's basically the same thing. So you don't have to rely on the abilities of the race for a class.
Yeah, there's lots of roads to most abilities in D&D.
And now that there is Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and they have the unique custom, what do they call it? Custom bloodline?
I think it's custom bloodline, something like that, yeah.
You can alter the sorts of either the abilities or
lineage. That's what it is, custom lineage.
Custom lineage. So you can alter the abilities or the stat boosts that you get out of any class, provided your DM agrees with it. But you can swap out stat boosts, your +1 stat boost from from charisma to intelligence if you really wanted to, or if you don't like something that the race gives you, say it gives you claws or something and you don't want it, you can change that out for a skill proficiency. That is the nice thing about Tasha's Cauldron of Everything custom lineage.
Yeah, Tasha's was a big game changer for D&D for 5e, but so and then we've sort of talked about this kind of in a roundabout way, but um, a lot of this talk about class and race has been optimizing for your role, and as we already mentioned, you don't really need to optimize in 5e.
No,
You can,
you can.
and if you care very much about wanting to have your big impactful moment in combat, optimization will help you get there. But the core of the game is getting into your characters and experiencing this world through your character. So, I mean, thinking of building your character from a role and from like what you intend to do with that role is a little bit doing it backwards.
It's kind of metagamey.
Yeah. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing it that way.
No.
But it's not like the sort of typical way that, you know, a lot of times people will come up with sort of a character and what they do, and then like assign race and class that makes sense for that. And that's a perfectly valid way of doing it. You know, when I keep using Shady as an example because she's my current baby, but when I was coming up with Shade of the Candle, you know, I knew she was going to be a Tabaxi first. That was like the one piece I really had. The other thing I had was that she was kind of a troublemaker, used her wits. She was not a buff fighter. She was tricky, acrobatic-y, you know, she was very athletic, etc. So, I mean, there's a couple of ways I could have built her. And I did build like 3 or 4 versions of her before I settled on Tabaxi Rogue. She could have been a fighter.
She could have. I couldn't see her as a fighter, but she could have.
Well, I mean, Tabaxi or Shady as a fighter would have focused on the athleticism part.
Okay.
Right. And she would still be dex-based fighter, right? She'd still be either in light or medium armor. She'd still be wielding dex-based swords, you know, rapiers and things like that. But she would have gone battle master, so she'd learn lots of different maneuvers, right? Or she could have started with bard. You know, she's been multi-classing into bard. She could have started as a bard. But the thing with bards is that they are in D&D, they're very magical. And I didn't picture Shady as a spellcaster, right? And I've since sort of taken a couple levels of bars, reskinning her spells to be her bag of tricks. But if she went pure bard, she'd have a ton of spells that I'd have to either figure out reskinning all of them, or just say, oh, screw it, Shady knows spells, which didn't match my character.
We tried. We did try and figure out some spells, and it's a little weird. It gets very weird very quickly unless you're an artificer.
Yeah. So that's, you know, that left Rogue, and Rogue worked very well for her athleticism because it gave her the cunning action, which made her very mobile, gave her access to acrobatics and athletics and stealth and all this stuff. And it gave her sneak attack, which fits her fighting style very well, because she's not a practiced practiced warrior with training, etc. She learned on the streets. She has a couple swords and she'll mess you up with them if you bother her. And otherwise, you know, she's very sloppy. She's just sort of flailing around with her swords, you know. So she doesn't hit very often. She's not doing the multiple attacks of a fighter. But when she does hit, she straight through the heart, right? So that worked very well for sneak attack. So.
Now, I went through a sort of similar thing with Swiftstorm, because when I created Swiftstorm, I knew that what I wanted a griffin, which, thank you for letting me play a griffin, by the way.
You're welcome.
I wanted a griffin that was kind of an unexpected fighter. Like you would not expect a griffin to be wielding a halberd and wielding armor and, you know, being a still being intelligent and being capable. So I wanted to go for that really weird sort of concept. The fighter thing kind of came later, but I knew I wanted to play a Gish. I wanted to play a Gish of some sort, which is the
lingo check. A Gish is a fighter and spellcaster combination. So like Jedi Knights.
Yes.
You know, they're using their lightsabers and they're also using the Force at the same time. That is a Gish, and that's got a long lineage in D&D going way back. But that's when you hear Gish, they mean a fighter magic user combination.
Yeah, and particularly out of a Gish, I wanted a spell sword, like someone who didn't just cast spells as they were swinging around a sword. I wanted someone that was both empowering themselves and empowering their weapons and possibly empowering their party. Not a blaster. I didn't want a blaster that was launching off fireball and then going in with sword swinging. So I did a lot of trying to figure out what I want to do with that, and eventually I went with Eldritch Knight because I really liked the Eldritch Knight, the ideas of the Eldritch Knight, which is someone who has this bond to their weapon and has a fairly decent range of spells, like using I think it's evocation and what was the other one?
Abjuration.
Abjuration.
I think, so they can do shield.
Yeah, so they have the ability to shield themselves. They have the ability to soak up damage with absorb elements. They have the ability, and with booming blade, green flame blade, which is very useful cantrips, where you can use a weapon strike and at the same time imbue your enemy with thunderous power that causes them damage if they move. She became very tanky. She became a very people could not get away from her.
Mm-hmm.
And so going forward, she built more and more into that, and she started as a character that I didn't really know where I wanted to go with her abilities, and she became over time a sticky tank, which is sticky tank meaning this tank is here, you cannot get away from this tank.
Yeah,
but I did that by way of both spells and also feats, taking on the Sentinel feat, which prevents someone from disengaging, which is using their action, or in the case of rogues, bonus action, to get away from a combat without.
Yeah. Swiftstorm has locked down giants, which is impressive.
Yes, she has. It's incredible. And I keep looking into different gishes because it's like, it has the feel of kind of what I want, but it's not quite right. So I keep looking into different things. I eventually went and multi-classed her into Sorcerer, which has created some very interesting effects. And but I'm looking at other things like Bard. I've been looking at Paladin, Warlock.
Yeah, I was going to say, Swiftstorm could have been built as a Paladin,
except
there's this role-playing element. Now, see, built into D&D, sort of, assuming you play it straight as written,
yes,
classes have role-playing implications as well. And one of the things about Paladins is they are devoted to
something,
a cause or a temple or
it's
a
not Swiftstorm.
lord or something.
She is neutral good.
Yeah.
She has no devotion to any. She is no longer even devoted to the city that she guarded in the first place, because that was years ago.
Yeah. So you couldn't really make. Mechanically, Swifty could have been made as a paladin. Role playing wise, she could not.
It would not have worked.
So you would have to either choose to change her personality or her background, etc., or come up with some reason why the role-playing element of Paladin was different. And either of those would have been viable paths to take.
It didn't work.
Yeah,
it was too much work. It was more than I wanted to do. So she has become a fighter Eldritch Knight, multi-class sorcerer, and she is a sticky magic tank that can burns through most of her sorcerer points to twin cast haste on herself and the paladin, and everyone has a bad day.
Yeah. And so talking about all these special abilities and what your party role is going to be, etc., leads into the topic of teamwork. And this is again something where during the session 0, assuming that there is one, and while you're working on building your own character, you also want to look at the other characters in the party and see, how they can work together effectively. Um, and no, alignments are not really that big a deal,
They're
and we'll
not
come
really a
back to
big
that.
deal. No, personality matters more than alignments.
Yep.
I said she was neutral good, but her alignment doesn't really come into it. It was more like she is unattached.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, but talking about the teamwork aspect, um, you want to build your party as a group so that you don't have like 4 barbarians, right? And nobody can do healing, right?
That would be
You'll
entertaining
be
for about 2 sessions.
Yeah, so I mean, imagine for a minute you have this group of people who they can steamroll anything that's weaker than they are. But the second they come up with something that's stronger than they are, they're all going to be flattened and nobody's going to pick them back up again, right? That's what a party of all paladins. I'm just picturing now. Oops, all paladins.
Oops, all bards. Well, actually, an all bard party may work.
Bards could probably
could do
pull it
it.
off because bards are the jack of all trades. So
It's
you
true.
have the fighty bard and the healy bard and the controlly bard and the facey bard, but bards are a special case. So
Paladins are not. Barbarians are not. They do have their limitations.
Yeah. And the other thing is a concept that was brought up a lot in 3rd edition. It's called niche protection. Not niche protection, niche protection. Yeah.
We need protection from him.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to keep him away from
Yeah.
Keep him away from your dice. He will curse them all.
Here is a problem that you run into in D&D a lot, which is you have a rogue. This rogue is super tricked out at being able to pick any lock in the world. They're a master thief. They've honed their craft for years. Wizard casts a knock spell. Rogue is useless now. Rogue, all that effort that the rogue came up with being to be good at something has been negated by a 1st level spell, right?
Knock is not a 1st level spell.
I don't know. It's a low level spell, relatively speaking. Point is that this is not something you want to have. You don't want people's choices to be negated this way. And it was a big problem. It was a big problem in 3rd edition, especially. The rogue and the cleric kind of made everybody else useless. And there's not a whole lot of ways around it because wizards are designed to be these sort of utility knife characters. With if nobody else in the party can do it, the wizard can probably do it.
Well, I mean,
they have to find the spell and memorize it, and they can't do it right away. They can't do it every time.
But that's why you do the session 0 in the first place, and you try and create parties that work.
That's where I was going with.
Sorry,
it's okay.
Jumping ahead. That's what I do.
Yeah. So in your session 0, you sort of figure out like what your protected niches are, and what everybody's role is, so that when the game comes, people get to do the thing they want their character to be doing. They get to do the thing they're good at. They get to have their moment of awesome, right? So, going back, I keep using Shady. We have another player in the party who has a warlock rogue, right? And I got very touchy about that character very early on because I like when I was coming up with Shady for the group, like I wanted a couple things for her. First, I wanted her to kind of be the problem child of the group. Not in a edgelordy conflict creating way, but in a she was the hot mess emotionally. And I wanted her to be the sneaky, stabby one because she was a rogue. So then this tiefling warlock rolls in, doesn't want to talk to anybody, is super surly, dresses all gothy and lurks in the corner and doesn't talk to anybody, and also is really good at killing things sneakily, right? I was like, Why, man? Why did you deliberately steal all my thunder this way? Right. And we didn't have a session 0, and
We did.
I
We had a
mean,
session point
yeah, I
5.
mean, we kind of did it. Well, the closest thing we had to a session 0 was mostly done over email.
It was okay.
Um,
So this was before I even heard of session 0. So we came back later on and did a session 0 after we did the first major story arc.
Yeah. So to mitigate this problem, I did a couple of things. First is I started leaning into the role of Shady as like leader and party cheerleader and like the planner, the talker, the doer of things. Since this other character is like sulking, Shady doesn't need to sulk. Sulking has been covered, right? We have the party sulker.
Were you going to actually have her be the party sulker?
No, but she was going to be a lot moodier. Like she was going to lean into that sort of Catra, sulking on the wall sometimes thing, which she still does. I mean, she hangs out in the crow's nest, etc. But anyway, so I leaned into more of the sort of cheerful pirate girl Shady, and less of the sort of dark thief Shady. And the other thing I did was I stopped focusing on her combat skills as much, because this warlock rogue takes a little bit to get started, but the player of this warlock rogue is like a gamer savant, and he just naturally falls into these ridiculous broken combinations, and so I was like, I don't care enough about combat to want to cheese out my combat abilities this much. So Shady is competent at fighting, but it's not like what she's best at. Shady is the one who's coming up with clever ideas, and I use the Jack Sparrow comparison for Shady all the time. Everybody's off doing a big fight, and she's running around. I got a jar of dirt, right? She's doing the weird thing that actually solves the problem while everybody else is doing fight.
Which is the fun part. Now you've got that sort of protecting your niche, but you've also got like say you have several different types of people who want to play the same role. Like I'm gonna go back to Swiftstorm because it's actually a good example, because in that campaign we have 3 tanks. Yep. We have fighter, paladin, cleric. So each one of those can take on the tanking role and have. And I don't think there's ever been a point where we didn't have a paladin and a fighter and a cleric, because we had Togar.
Well, the cleric was always there. There was always a paladin, I think, except for
like a couple of sessions.
There was like one session when Togar had left and Adlier wasn't there yet. I think.
Like 1 or 2. And then we had Adlier, and then now we have 3 tanks again. So that we each had to define our different sorts of roles. Like Swiftstorm, her role is to be the biggest thing on the battlefield and draw all the attention to her.
Yeah, Swiftstorm is the immovable object.
She is the immovable object that will draw your attention. She will grab up all the mooks.
Yep.
And everything else. And she will, with her 27 AC, not get hit. Because that's what it can be with haste now. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. Monsters, the giants have like a plus 16 to hit. I'm not too worried. So.
But now we have Adlier, who is the single tank. Like the single person tank. He will go towards the big bad, focus on them, and come out with supernova, which he can only do once or twice a day.
Yeah. Paladins go Nova, and for that battle, oh my god! And then for every battle after that, I'm here. I'm hitting things with this.
So, yeah. So you can define your different types of roles. I mean, there's different flavors of each different role, either the blasty, the control-y, the face. Like, if you have two-faced characters, well, one can be the deceiver, or the other can be the persuader, or another can be the intimidator. If you have several controller roles, well, maybe someone is just controlling all the mooks, you know, the big AoE spells like web or grease. Or you have someone who is the single person controller, like Tasha's hideous laughter. Because concentration, which concentration, we haven't covered this yet. If you have a concentration spell, you can only hold one of them at a time. It prevents wizards from using all of their spells at once.
And it's a good thing.
It's a good thing.
Yeah.
And if you're a blaster, I mean, look, more blasting is good. More damage is good.
And overlap is a good thing, too. I mean, we talk about niche protection a little, but, like, you know, in MMOs, you have the tank and the off tank, you have the healer and the off healer, right? It's not a bad thing that Shady and Shauna, that was the other thing, is her name was exactly like Shady's name, but Shady and Shauna can both do stealth, right? So they sometimes go off scouting together to cover each other's back, right? Or when we did this scenario where we were sneaking into the Admiral's house, everybody else who was not so good at sneaking was out front creating the big distraction, so Shady and Shauna could go and actually sneak into the house because they were both good sneakers. All right, so it's not bad to have multiple characters who are good at a thing. It's just you want to have like one character have their specialization.
Have different flavors.
You can be a backup.
Have your different flavors of that role.
Yeah. And the different parts of the team can work together in ways that benefit each other. So I mentioned the concept of the meat shield already, right? Like the point of the tank is to be the one who's taken the hits so that the other members of the party can go do other things.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So your DPS characters, who are going to be like your rogues, your evoker, wizard, sorcerers. DPS, your characters who do damage. Their job is to
what was that? Like you low sorcerers.
Sorcerers, well, they're like evokers, you know. They
sorcerers.
They can do damagey spells. I mean, certain flavors of sorcerer are more DPS than others. My point, I'm not like dissing on sorcerers. It's something else entirely. I'm talking and thinking at the same time, and you know that's why you see smoke coming out of my ears. But now you got me all.
Now you know why I can't stream for very long.
Yeah, no. So because the tank is there, like keeping the enemies focused, the DPS can go in and actually do the damage, right? The controller's job is to herd the enemies toward the tank, right? Or keep the enemies from getting around or whatever. The tank's job is to hold the bad guys. You can do the same thing with social encounters, right? So if you have somebody who's very loud and distracty, you can have them putting on a big show while somebody else is sneaking around the edges, you know, picking pockets or having secret meetings in the corner or whatever. You want people to have different abilities that complement each other, and you want to know like which piece is mine, you know, which is my piece. Am I the big talky person? Am I the pickpockety person or whatever it is? And you know, these are decisions that they can evolve over time as the campaign goes. You gain more abilities, or you decide a character's not working the way you want. But you want to sort of at least address it at the beginning with the other players, so that there's like agreement on stuff.
I agree. I agree completely.
And hello, Black Tiger.
I don't have anything to add to that. No, I really don't. I think we've covered that one.
Well, I mean, we've been here about an hour. Any questions people would like us to talk about?
Yes. We've been yammering this entire hour. Chat, do you have any questions for us and anything that we've talked about in our ADHD rambles?
Yeah,
Look,
or advice on how to build a particular role or
yes, we have experience with both of those.
Yep.
Like if you get to, I just want to keep saying, like you get two ADHD people in the same room, we're going to have a constant conversation. It's going to go on for 3 hours and no one knows what we're talking about at the end.
There'll be some very interesting things brought up, and half the time they'll be dropped before we get into it.
We won't remember what we talked about.
Yep. So let's look at some of these comments. So Plotline is saying, kind of like with Relita, I envisioned her being more Catwoman or Black Cat, but she's kind of become more protector or guardian of her crew.
Well, if you wanted to be more Catwoman or Black Cat, that would be more Ranger-ish? Not Ranger, roguish, Ranger-ish.
Yeah. But then we'd be looking at like 3 rogues.
3 rogues.
Right?
Oh yeah. No, it's the rogues gallery.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, that's something where the idea can evolve. You know, Shady evolved from being sort of more edgy to being more loud, right? Because I didn't want to be fighting with Jamie over who gets to be the edgelord of the group. Right.
You're all
you want to be the
edgelords.
edgelord, fine. Go ahead. You know.
Just a party of edgelords. Yeah. You get a warlock, a barbarian, a cleric of some sort of war, of some sort of war god, another rogue. And it's just a party of angry people who stay in the corner.
Oops, all edgelords.
Oops, all edgelords.
Yeah.
Look, I at least have to get one pun in every session. Come on. At least it actually ran with the theme this time.
So no, we got no questions.
I don't think we have any questions. Do we want to talk about alignment?
Sure. Alignment was brought up, and we've talked a little bit about it before. So alignment, ignore it. That was easy. No. So alignment is a thing that used to be a lot more important in D&D. And the oldest roots of Dungeons and Dragons are like pulp fantasy and also some of the sort of weird fantasy that was coming out in the 50s and 60s. And I believe it's Moorcock Moorcock's world has this war between the forces of law with a big L and the forces of chaos with a big C. Right? And in the first edition D&D stuff, you can still see that. Like they keep on the Borderlands as written. The fortress is a fortress of law that is on the edge of the Borderlands to the lands of chaos.
Oh.
Right. And your job is to help the defenders of law fight the forces of chaos.
Gotcha.
And as the game evolved, you know, you had the side of law and the side of chaos, which are kind of like, you know, the Horde and the Alliance in Warcraft or whatever, right? And then people were like, yeah, but what about like good and evil? So somewhere along the line,
what?
Gygax or somebody is like, okay, so we've got this double axis of good and evil, law and chaos, or good.
Put yourself somewhere in there, and that became much more of an influence, especially in like 3E, where
second edition was where alignment was very important, and late first edition, second edition, because characters like paladins could only be lawful good.
Oh,
right. Assassins could only be some form of evil.
Yeah.
Rangers could only be good. You know, there were all these stuff built around alignment.
That is annoying.
Yeah, and if the DM felt like your character was not playing according to their professed alignment, the DM could say your alignment changed, and that might lock you out of your chosen class, at which point you would lose like ability to access those class levels and stuff. And it became, you know, among the kind of DM who likes yanking their players' chains. I don't recommend that if you're a DM. Stop it.
Don't
right
do
now.
it.
But there are there's always some asshole who wants to torment players. Like
Yeah.
they get off on being
I don't know why.
powerful that way. So what became a thing was like baiting the paladin into falling, tempting the paladin to stray from being lawful good, so you go, aha, you're screwed now.
Now you're evil. Congratulations.
Yeah. And there were paladins being lawful good had all these restrictions about, they had to like give away like at least 10% of all their treasure to a church, and they couldn't like hang out with thieves and things like that. So that evolved into the lawful stupid paladin, who was like, "Oh, I sure am glad that my friend here who wears leather and hangs out in the shadows all the time is an upstanding fighter who doesn't steal anything."
No, not at all. Nope.
While I'm looking in this direction, and yeah, so when third edition came, they started trying to weed that out.
There was definitely less of that. I do remember there was still, like, monks still had to be lawful.
Monks still had to be lawful, and paladins still had to be, I think they still had to be lawful good.
Lawful good, yeah.
Yeah, and that was a result of feedback from playtesting.
Druids had to be neutral.
Yeah. Originally, they were going to leave all that stuff out, but the playtesters of third edition were like, no, this is too different. I want my lawful good paladins. So they left it in. And as third edition evolved, people got to be more like, this is a pain. This isn't adding any fun.
So now in 5th edition, you can ignore it completely. There are no restrictions at all to any class related to alignment. It's a thing.
You have Eberron to thank for that, actually. I forget the author's name of the Eberron books now. I'm blanking on his name. But when he wrote Eberron, he was very explicit about alignment still exists if you want it for like detect evil spells and things like that, but it's not really a thing. Like, you could have traditionally metallic dragons were good, chromatic dragons, the red, black, blue, etc., were evil.
They don't have to be anymore.
Yeah. In Eberron, no. The dragon has his abilities and he has his personality.
Dragons have independent personalities too,
Yeah. You can't depend on.
So, oh wow, we just lost. What?
Huh? What?
Hold on a sec. I'm losing all of the frames. Okay, coming back. Yeah, my internet must have just blipped for some reason. Okay, we're back.
Okay. So yes, Keith Baker built that into Eberron, and everybody saw, wow, this just works so much better. And so alignment still is there as a vestige, but most people more or less ignore it anyway.
It's more like something you use to relate to your personality. Like I go back to Swiftstorm's personality and say she's neutral good. Well, she is generally good in that her personality is that she's generally wants to help other people and generally wants to do good things, but she is also neutral in that she is unattached to things. She's not attached to law or chaos, or she's works on her own whim in regards to how she does good.
Yeah, alignment is still a handy shorthand, a handy descriptor. And alignment still applies on a cosmic level. Like, angels are good with a capital G and devils are evil with a capital E, right? But a good character or an evil character, that's just how you describe them. It's not as much source for creatures.
So we did have a question in the chat now. Multiclassing. Yes or no?
Yeah. Yes or no. It depends entirely on what you want.
Yeah, I like. Okay, so I like multiclassing. I'm Swiftstorm, like I said, is a fighter Eldritch Knight sorcerer who has been homebrewed so that Eldritch Knight has charisma as their spell casting, because it's weird to have them be intelligence.
Well, also Swift-Storm has this custom background where she's been transformed into this sort of quasi-fey creature, and so she's closer to
Yeah, it works,
a sorcerer,
but
and
it's
yeah,
that's off track. But yeah, multiclassing can really give your characters new abilities. One thing I like to say when it comes to giving your characters new abilities or doing multiclassing is that it makes them more. It makes them more of themselves, or makes them more of a concept. It doesn't necessarily make them more powerful, but it makes them more of a concept that you're looking for. It can be more powerful, like if you put a paladin sorcerer.
yeah, yeah. And multiclassing is another thing that's changed over the course of the game. Like in the very early days, it was very difficult to multiclass. Only certain races were even able to multiclass, and they had to like keep their classes even, or
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera,
Ugh.
et cetera.
Multiclassing is much more easier in 5th edition. Most thing
Yeah,
you really have to do is if you're a spellcaster, you need to make sure that you are checking. There is a chart in
yeah,
in the multiclassing section of the PHB that tells you, okay, so if you're this level, this is what sort of your spells you're supposed to have, how many spells per level you're supposed to have.
mhm,
If you're multiclassing into a half caster, you half that. If you're multiclassing into a 1/3 caster, you 1/3 that. And
yeah.
so that's how you generate your spells. Otherwise,
Yeah, I mean
yeah,
there are implications for your build with multiclassing. Like most classes don't really come online until third level.
yeah,
They don't like get their really good stuff until third level. So
yeah,
if you're going to dip into a class, right, you have to decide how far you're going to go with that class.
yeah.
And that's going to dilute your base class. So like Shady is multiclassing into Bard. So that she gets some weird abilities that I've reskinned as her like gadgets and stuff. She's got this belt like Batman she's carrying around of stuff. Um, and I have to decide, is she going to keep going down Bard? Is she going to go back to Rogue? Blitzy has a house rule in his campaign that you can only choose one other class for your multi-class.
Yes, because if the
Uh,
one way that you can screw up a character is by multiclassing repeatedly. You can make them really complicated or underpowered by choosing the incorrect multiclassing. It can be really powerful, but you can really easily do it wrong, and you'll
yeah,
mess up your character.
yeah. And so that has impacted both Shady and Shauna, the Warlock Rogue, because she was originally going to be, I forget what her third class was going to be, um, but she was going to be a 3-class build.
Yeah.
Shauna was, and a
Uh,
couple of my versions of Shady were 3-class builds, and I still kind of like some of those. That would be Rogue Bard Fighter,
right.
right?
Right.
But with the third class locked out, then I have to look at, okay, well, how far into Bard is Shady going to go? I know that I don't ever want Shady to go past level 6 in Bard because there's nothing for her after that in Bard.
Right.
I don't know if I want her to actually go all the way up to level 6, right? There's a lot of stuff in Rogue I still want her to have.
Right.
And as the levels go on, she gets like her 9th level Rogue ability Panache is really nice. And I really want her to have it, but every level she takes in Bard before 9th pushes that further out of reach.
That's
So I
that,
have to
that's
I
another
have
thing to
to
keep
look
in
at
mind
that.
too, because if you will push back the abilities that you get, like you want a nice like you want a 10th level ability in one class. Well, if you multi-class, that's going to be pushed back to 12th, 13th, 14th level, and you have to
Mhm.
decide where that power split is going to be. Where do you want that split to be?
Yeah.
And
And at low levels, a lot of your character development is going to be spent on raising your ability scores,
yeah,
which gets pushed back if you keep doing the first couple levels of different classes. So
yeah. So that is another reason why I have only one other class. You can only have one multi-class, or two classes, whatever.
Yeah.
So
I don't have that rule in my game. I don't think anybody's taken more than
no, I don't think so.
one other class, but I haven't run into it. It's just a matter of.
I feel like it's a good way to maintain a concept and to encourage people to focus on a single concept, as opposed to getting multiple multi-classes. It dilutes both the character and the character's power, but also the character as a character. So that's my reasoning to that. So that was a long answer. Short answer, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, multi-class. I feel that even for a new player, multi-classing can be beneficial and not very
some
difficult.
combos are really nice.
Oh,
Fighter Rogue is a real nice combination.
Yeah.
Warlock Paladin is a crazy combination. There are some things that just naturally go together, like chocolate and peanut butter, and then there's some combinations that don't work well at all, like monk and almost anything else. It's not a great combo usually. Fighter or let's not do fighter. Let's try paladin and wizard. Don't go well together because a paladin needs to have a high charisma and a wizard has to have a high intelligence.
Fighter can multi-class with anything, depending on what you decide to do with the fighter.
Depending on what your other stats are in.
Yes.
As long as you got strength and con, whatever your other stats are.
Yes. Basically, yes. So, in terms of a new player choosing to multi-class, a lot of the difficulties and a lot of the drawbacks, like we mentioned, of multi-classing in previous editions are not there. You don't have to worry about XP multiplication or division. There are requirements. So the requirements to usually for multiclass, the requirement is to have 13, an ability score of 13 or above in the primary ability score for the class. So like if you want to in both classes. Okay. Yeah. So if you're a fighter and you want to say multiclass into sorcerer, you have to have strength 13 and charisma 13.
Well, fighter, it's strength or dex.
Strength or dex, yes. Strength or dex 13, and then charisma is 13. That's the only requirement. You read the artificer does not really multi-class with anything except fighter and wizard. Wizard is great to even just take one level and get more spells. Well, I mean, artificer
so
and wizard.
Artificer doesn't mesh well with a lot of other things because
probably not.
They specialize in intelligence and they have a lot of level dependent stuff like artificers. A lot of artificers' abilities are based on their level in artificer.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you only have a couple levels in artificer, a lot of your abilities are going to be hamstrung.
So in my other character, Sparky, was at first a rogue artificer, rogue 1 artificer, whatever, and it kind of worked because it got the artificer without going. She was an artillerist artificer who wielded a gunblade. It's being a little bit edgy, a little bit. And I was also playing Final Fantasy at the time and really into Gunbreaker. Surprise! But it worked for a little bit, but I found myself not using the rogue abilities at all. And it was probably because she was an artillerist. But the only reason that I went rogue was to gain the martial, to gain some sneak attack and skills, but also to get the martial weapons ability, martial weapons proficiency, and it just didn't work. It really didn't work. So I'm gonna have to agree. That artificer can really only do fighter or wizard, and
yeah, and that's not the rules don't say that. It just doesn't work very well.
It just doesn't mesh very well because, like you said, they're really intelligence based, but they're also, if you delay artificer at all, if you delay any of artificer's abilities, you don't like by going through a multi-class, you don't gain power the same way that other classes, as you multi-class, would gain power.
Yeah, sorcerer is kind of the same way. Sorcerer is already a slow burn.
Yeah.
So if you multi-class in sorcerer, you end up with an even slower burn.
Yeah, so it's a very slow burn, and you're going to be behind everyone else.
Yeah, and multi-classing spell casting classes especially has this weird thing where you gain the ability to cast higher level spells, but not the ability to learn those higher level spells. So you end up with these spell slots that are only used to blow up lower level spells, which can be neat. But that was the thing I ran into with Aiko, was that because she had sorcerer and wizard, which that was a conceptual build that I just wanted to play with. She had a ton of low level spells, and she had like the ability to cast third level spells, but she couldn't learn third level spells.
Yeah.
And third level is when spells get good, so she was kind of gimped by this choice that I had made. So and I made it for Aiko as a role playing choice, and it was part of the whole my whole coming to the conclusion that Aiko didn't work. Was part of it was because I wanted her as a sorcerer / wizard, and sorcerer / wizard is just not a good combo.
And Swiftstorm being a fighter sorcerer, she was fine. Like, she was Eldritch Knight is fine on their own, but the build didn't really come online until level 10, because that's when she got sorcerer points, and she was able to quick spell. Like, you quick spell as a fighter sorcerer, and you quick spell, say, Blade Ward, which gives you resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing. You turn that into a quick spell, which makes it a bonus action, and then you've still, as a fighter, you still have 2 attacks.
You still get to fight, yeah.
You still have 2 attacks, and you have Blade Ward, and then now you're taking half damage, and that is incredible as a fighter.
Yeah, and some classes are really good, what we call dip classes, which you take a couple of little levels. So fighter is a brilliant one for that. A lot of what makes a fighter happens between levels 1 and 3, and anything after that is gravy. Rogue is a very good dip class to either 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or 5th level. The abilities you get there are very impactful compared to what you get later. And so when you're looking at multi-classing, think about classes that are good dip classes versus ones that are not. So if you have like in the case of Swiftstorm, by the time she was like 5th level, she was a brilliant fighter. And she could have stayed a 5th level fighter and done everything else in sorcerer and been just as good a fighter as she ever was, with the exception of having fewer hit points.
Right.
Because sorcerers have a smaller hit die.
Right. I had something I was going to say, and I totally lost it.
Oops.
Oh well.
Yep. What else? Barbarians got some good multi-class options. Yeah, barbarians. You got nothing to lose by dipping a couple levels of barbarian. If you're doing a martial character, fighter barbarian is great. Monk barbarian can work, but is iffy. Rogue barbarian is a terrible combination, because barbarians are all strength and rogues are all dex, and never the twain shall meet. So
there's always a barbarian, which is interesting.
Barbarian is surprisingly effective. Cleric barbarian can be very good.
Yeah.
Paladin barbarian can actually be kind of good, but assuming it's a strength paladin and not a dex paladin, stuff like that. Let's see. Anything else? Are any more questions, or anything else you would like us to yammer on about for a bit? And or things you would like us to do for D&D Player 103.
What would be 103? 103 would be spells?
Maybe, like spell casting and how it works.
Yeah, spell casting, maybe equipment. We touched on equipment a little bit, but maybe we could...
Yeah, I mean, equipment...
You could do a little bit magic items, which you hate.
That's a simplistic description of my feelings towards magic.
Dislike, mildly irritated at. Nietzsche and I have very different philosophies when it comes to magic items.
Well, also it depends on what flavor of fantasy you want. Like there are settings that I would be more amenable to magic items. Orbis Leonis, the world of my campaign and the one that your Everkeep game is in is on the lower end of the magic scale. But like if we were playing in Eberron, everybody would have magic items because it's baked into that setting. So it's a little different from that.
Oh gosh, you can make a team of characters multi-class with Bard to make a band on. I would love to play a band on tour someday.
I'm sure there's a stream somewhere of a campaign of that.
I would love that. Ace says what the various dice rolls would be. That would be good for 103.
So go more in depth. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, we could do that.
Yeah.
Dice rolling is, I mean, it's an integral part of the game, but it's also sort of very ad hoc. You roll this die for this and that die for that. And
well, I mean, we can go over like what kind of the typical dice you go through like like you're always going to be using d20s for everything, and everything else you're using the smaller dice, and sometimes occasionally the percentile.
Yeah,
actually, that was it right there. That was it right there.
Yeah. Percentile dice don't get used anywhere near as much as they used to. They used to be lots of uses for the percentile dice.
So in previous editions, you used to use a lot more dice because your attacks would have a d6, a d4, a d8 attacked onto it because you've got some sort of magic item, or you used to have someone who casts something on you. Now it's just you have advantage.
I mean, they lost dice in some places and gained them in others. But
but usually it's just you're going to be using a different dice for your weapon, and you may have a different dice for a special ability.
Yeah.
We can touch on.
I mean, the very first editions of D&D used die 6 for everything, because that was what it was available.
Yeah, that's true.
It wasn't until they started writing Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, not selling it, but writing Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, that they started using polyhedral dice because they were available. They had not previously been available, and
we have this thing now. We can use it.
Yeah,
and now people will be addicted to them.
Yeah, well, the stupid thing about it is in the boxed set of Dungeons and Dragons, the first national release of Dungeons and Dragons in a big way, the factory that was making the dice couldn't keep up with demand. So halfway through the original edition of Dungeons and Dragons, they ran out of dice because the dice were included in the box. Because unless you were a university student, it was real hard to get a hold of polyhedral dice because there weren't game stores all over the country. So what they did was, and I had the ran out of dice edition of this boxed set. Okay, that was my introduction to D&D. What they did was they had a sheet of a cardboard sheet of little square counters called chits. You hear things referred to as chits. They're just little game counters, and they were numbered 1 to 20, 1 to 12, 1 to 8, 1 to 10, 1 to 4.
You pull one from a hat?
No, you put them. You tore them all off of the thing. You put them in the box, and when you needed to roll a die 20, you pulled out a chit, and the number on the chit was what you rolled. And so that was a fun little era. Yeah, it was terrible. I mean,
I don't like it.
Yeah. Now, can you imagine taking that and rolling 5d6 for a fireball? I rolled a 3, put it back in the box. I rolled another 3, put it back in the box. I roll a 4, put it back in the box. So fun times with ancient D&D.
I think we're gonna cut it out there.
I think we're probably pretty much done there.
That sounds confusing as heck, and I hate it.
Yeah.
But yes, thank you everyone for coming in and watching us tonight. This has been D&D Player 101, 102.
102, yeah.
Now we do 103. We'll figure out what we're going to talk about then. If you lost one
Yeah,
shit, you were
if you
screwed.
lost your shit, you were screwed.
You had
Yeah,
to make a new.
so
You had to
you
make a
could
new
have
one.
like different cups with different dice. So you'd have your die 4 cup and your die 6 cup and your die
You
8
have
cup.
to make a new one, and it has to be exactly like all the others, so you can't tell that you're picking out a 6.
Yeah, you can't take by feel. Oh, this is the 4. I'm taking this one.
Here's your 4.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the one. We're avoiding that one.
Yeah, I'm sure there was absolutely no cheating of any kind.
No, not at all. Nope.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes, Alkin are coming to D&D.
They are.
The May book is going to be cool. So.
Strixhaven.
Is it Strixhaven?
I think it's Strixhaven.
Okay. Well, Strixhaven and the Fey book are both going to be very cool. And Dragon book is probably going to be cool too, although it's more interesting to Inkblitzer than it is to me. Inkblitz. Sorry, I always put that R on there.
That R has not been in there since
it's on Twitter and I see it every day.
I've dropped the ER in the actual name since 2013, and he still calls me Inkblitzer because it's my Twitter handle. Because
that's how I met you, was Inkblitzer.
Inkblitz is okay. So there is an @Inkblitz, and it's a tattoo parlor somewhere that is still holding on to the name and hasn't been used since 2016. Twitter, please let me have the handle.
Maybe you should do like Inkblitz _ something.
You know, no, Twitter. Twitter. I am appealing to you. Let me have the handle.
Twitter is never going to do anything that's good for you. No, Twitter is bad.
All right, we are heading out. Thank you all for watching, and we will be back next week. Stay frosty.
Night.